This screencast is looking at Summer 13 Question 7, focused on ratio analysis in the context of working capital management. So kind of assuming you've read through the question, and hopefully you've attempted it as well, but we're going to focus on Part A and Part B, which asks you to calculate the working capital management for NML, the particular company here, and the industry for 2013, and also to comment briefly on those results for a total of 9 marks. Now, the first thing to note is the cash conversion cycle is essentially a general measure of how efficient a company is at managing its working capital, and it's typically made up of 3 components. So we call the CCC, which is the cash conversion cycle. It's made up of inventory conversion period, which is the first one. You add to that your trade receivable collection period, sometimes known as trade receivable days. And again, inventory conversion period can be known as inventory days, just in case you see different terminology. And then you take off or minus your trade payable payment period, also known as your trade payable days. So essentially you're saying you're adding your inventory conversion period, that is, on average, how long does it take you to sell your stock? So if you're a manufacturer, which Nordic manufacturing is in this question, it involves how long does it take you to get the goods in, your raw materials, to manufacture the good, and to sell the finished good on to your customer. You add to that how long it takes you to get your customer to pay you. So from the time you sell the good till you get it in, how long does that take? And then you take off any credit you get from your suppliers. Typically there's 3 main ratios. You have inventory days ratio, trade receivable days, and trade payable. However, in a manufacturing company, this will typically, inventory days will be split into 3. It will be split into raw material conversion period, work in progress conversion period, and then finished goods conversion period. So all you're doing is essentially looking at it in a bit more depth, because in a manufacturing environment you actually have 3 different types of inventory. You have finished goods, you have work in progress, and again working back to your raw material that you initially start with. So when we're doing the cash conversion cycle here, we're likely going now to have 5 ratios. 3 for inventory, 1 for trade receivables, and 1 for trade payables. And again, remember at CAP1 you do get a formula sheet, but the working capital ratios or any other ratios will not be on it. So you need to know these going into the exam. And this is a very good detailed example of calculating cash conversion cycle. So what we're going to do is we're going to put NML here, and we're going to compare that then to the industry. So the first one we're going to look at raw materials. And again, what I'll do is I'll put the formula here so everyone knows what formula we're using. So raw materials, what you're going to do is you're going to put we'll just call it RM, inventory, and you're going to put it over the purchases of raw materials. So that's important there, that you watch what you're going to put it over. You try and compare like for like. You purchase raw materials and you have a raw materials inventory. Right, so that's an important one there. Over raw materials purchases. So in the case of NML, you're going to have 93,000 of inventory divided by 255, and again I should have remembered myself, it's times 365. So remember, you have to do times 365 to get the number of days. So again, we'll keep these nice and neat. We'll round to the first day. So for NML it's 133 days. So on average your raw materials are sitting on hand for 133 days before they're actually used. So the formula is raw material inventory over raw material purchases, and again you have credit on 100% of purchases. So you're typically only interested in a question dealing with credit purchases or credit sales, because cash sales have no impact in terms of trade receivable or trade payable days. So in this case we have 100% of our purchases are on credit, therefore we used 100%, and it will be 93 over 255 times 365. Again, we'll just try and keep that in the center. And the industry is the same. The industry has on average 54.5 of raw materials inventory. They have 210 of purchases of raw materials times 365. So we can see here in an industry average, the industry is a lot more efficient at utilizing raw materials quicker than the subject company NML that we're looking at. That's one key point we're going to make. The next is work in progress. And again, similar logic here, but it's important to pay attention because if you have work in progress, you have to work what degree of completion is work in progress. Because you're going to have to multiply that by the cost of goods sold to get the second figure to put in your ratio. So you won't be putting the full amount of cost of goods produced, cost of goods sold, you'll be putting it times the work in progress completion. So that's why this is a very good question to look at, because it has all the key ratios for cash conversion cycle that could come up. So you put your work in progress over cost of goods sold or cost of goods produced times work in progress percentage. So you put that in brackets underneath, and then you multiply that by 365 as well. So the key point our students would have got caught there is you need to multiply cost of goods sold, which they call cost of goods produced, by the work in progress percentage, which you're given here is 70%. So the formula there would be work in progress is 43 over 372 times 70% times 365. So again, you're trying to compare like for like. If the work in progress is only ever 70% complete, you need to make sure you're comparing that to 70% completion of cost of goods produced. So that means on average goods are held in work in progress for 60 days. So from the time you get it, from using your raw materials, it takes another on average 60 days to manufacture a finished good. So we'll compare that to what the industry takes. The industry has 29,000 over 315 times 70% as well, because both of them have 70% work in progress percentage, times 365. So 48. So again, the industry is more efficient at once they start converting the raw materials, they get things done a lot quicker. And that perspective, they're better at managing their working capital, because the less days, the more efficient you are in terms of inventory management. And the final one then is your finished goods. And this essentially is a measure of, on average, how long are finished goods sitting in inventory before they're sold on. So once you have manufactured the good, how long is it sitting in the warehouse before it's sold on? And that is the finished goods over the cost of goods sold times 365. So you've no multiply by work in progress here. It's just a fairly straightforward one. Again, you're using the information given in the question, 65.5 over 372 times 365. So on average, the goods will be standing in the warehouse for 64 days before they're sold on. So again, the bigger this is, the less efficient the company is at managing its inventory. For the industry, the average finished goods inventory is 59. Divide by the cost of goods produced or sold is 315 times 365. So actually, in fact, NML are slightly bit more efficient here, because they can sell goods on average 4 days quicker than the industry. So it's not material, but again, overall they are more efficient. So we can see here from an inventory perspective, if we totted up all of them, the core inventory days for NML would be 258, but it would only be, so here, 211. So let's show a little tot there for the industry. So you're losing about 47 days there straight away. Now you don't have to tot them up there, you can just tot them up at the finish. But just giving you an idea, there's a clear differential between how good the industry is at managing its inventory, which is one core component of the cash conversion cycle, and how good NML are. The final two then are your trade receivable collection period, which again you can call trade receivable days, That's essentially trade receivable over credit sales times 365. So it is always over credit sales. If you're not told anything about what percentage are credit, we typically use the full amount. We are told specifically in this question 80% of their sales are credit. Therefore the formula is going to be 58,000, which is receivables for NML, divided by 540. So I put the 540 in brackets because it's only 80% of that are credit, times 365. So it's only the credit sales you use, because the other 20% are in cash, and that would have no impact on receivables, because cash, you get the cash in straight away. So in that regard, the average, so let's copy down the format. The average time taken for your customers to pay you is 49 days. The same formula for the industry. It'll be their trade receivables, which are 47, divided by the average sales, which is 468.75, and again times 80%, because you're told it's the same percentage for both the NML and the industry. And don't forget to multiply by 365. So on average there, it takes the industry 46 days. So there's not material difference. They get paid about, on average, 3 days quicker than NML. So not materially different overall. And the final one then is your trade payable payment terms, or payment period. So this measures on average how long does it take you to pay your suppliers. So here it'll be trade payables over purchases or credit purchases times 365. Now credit purchases here is 100% of purchases, so therefore we just use the full amount. Now it's also important to bear in mind, in terms of purchases, that sometimes you will not be told what the percentage is, or you may not be given purchases in the question. Therefore you can use cost of sales or cost of goods sold as an approximation. So either or, just make sure if you're not given the actual purchases figure, you typically expect it to use a proxy as a best estimate. So for NML, it will be trade payables is 49, purchases is 255 times 365. So on average, it's taking you 70 days to pay your suppliers. And again, remember here, the higher it is, the better you're at managing your cash flows. Because the longer credit you get from your suppliers, the better it is from a working capital management perspective. And the same for the industry. It's going to be 33.5 divided by 210, which is the purchases, and 100% are on credit, times 365. So 58. So we can see here, actually NML are better at managing their creditors than the industry, because they're getting 12 days extra credit. So getting the cash conversion cycle, again, don't lose the easy mark, because you were actually asked what is the cycle itself. So make sure you tot them up. So the cycle is the sum of the 3 inventory days plus the trade receivable collection period, as above, and minus the trade payable payment period, because this is reducing the amount of time you have to wait. So plus this and minus this. So remember, the cash conversion cycle is essentially telling you, on average, how long do you have to wait from the time you pay your suppliers till the time your customers pay you. So on average, NML have to wait 237 days. And you can see the core driver of that is their inventory management. So that's the biggest component here. Same approach for the industry. It's the inventory plus the trade receivable collection period minus the trade payables payment period. So overall then there's a difference of 38 days, which again is significant in terms of the working capital management. So if you're commenting briefly on the results obtained in Part A, you would make an overall point to say that NML have a worse cash conversion cycle or are less efficient at managing their working capital than the industry average. And you'd identify that the primary driver of this is with regards inventory management. Not much difference in finished goods. but the key issues are around raw materials and work in progress. And you might recommend to say you need to investigate further why is the company so inefficient in comparison to the industry average, and do they need to change their procedures. There's limited difference in trade receivables, so their credit policies and credit management in terms of their customers appear to be fairly consistent, and they actually appear to be better at managing their supplier credit than the industry. So that is a positive. So the primary thing to take away is, one, overall they're less efficient at managing their working capital, and the second one is the primary driver of that are raw materials and work in progress. And remember, a key point from the examiner feedback for the last couple of years is do not write too much. A lot of students are writing too much narrative. If it's only 2 marks, you're expecting 3 solid bullet points of maybe a line or 2 each, but you're not expecting more than that. Students are coming back with a page or 2 pages for 2 or 3 marker, and while you may get the full marks for that question, the examiner is pointing out that you'll run out of time and you won't finish the full 6 questions that are required on the paper. So that screencast looked at Summer 13 question 7, focused on ratio analysis in the context of working capital management.